Good evening, everyone. Welcome to July's Creative Center workshop here in Zoom. My name is Coca Trevino, Project Manager at Big Medium, and today I'm super happy to have Ariel René Jackson giving us an introduction to video editing. If you don't know her, Ariel is a multidisciplinary artist. She's also the curator for Austin's Cage Match Project and the host of the podcast for the Cage Match Project. She earned her MFA at the University of Texas in Austin in 2019, and she's an alum of the Skowhegan School of Painting and Sculpture. Her work has been shown nationally at institutions such as the SculptureCenter, Q Art Foundation, Contemporary Art Center, New Orleans, and a Depaul Art Museum, Studio Museum in Harlem, and RISD Museum. Very, very nice. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for preparing this workshop for us, Ariel. Good evening, and take it away.
Yeah, thank you so much, Coca, and thank you, Big Medium, for making this happen. I've always wanted to teach, and so if you'll bear with me, this is my first time teaching to such a large amount of people, so I'll try not to be too nervous.
Don't look at the number.
I'm trying not to. Yeah, so welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. So what I'm hoping to provide for you today is a introduction to the history of video editing, which I feel like you will enjoy as much as I will, along with an overview of Premiere Pro. I will also be discussing very briefly other editing softwares that you can look into, some that are more affordable but maybe offer different options for what you can use them for. And then I'll go into something I think is really fun, different editing techniques, different editing styles, so that you can see just what the possibilities are. So before I get into everything, I just want to talk a little bit about myself and about my background. My name is Ariel René Jackson, and I consider myself a film artist, and I'll explain that in a little bit. I got my, as Coca already said, I got my MFA here in Austin, and I got my bachelor's in fine arts at the Cooper Union, which is a private school in New York City. I arrived there as a freshman as a painter and decided that I wanted to make the scenes in my head move, and began taking film, photography, and animation classes. I also wanted to see these scenes in my head happen in real life. I wanted to manipulate reality. And so I was able to play around with actual film. And what I mean by that is not something that is digital, like a file. So like a material film that has individual frames. And I was interested in understanding the difference between video and film, which my understanding is that video is primarily digital and is therefore considered the term to describe a multiple camera setup. So if I were to be having a conversation with someone in front of me, having one camera pointed this way to record the person I'm talking to, and then have another camera facing me, that's a 2-camera setup. And so because of the introduction of digital cameras like DSLR, we're able to afford having multiple cameras. Whereas back in the day, during the early times of cinema and filmmaking, it was more sensible to have a singular film. And so that's where film is considered to be, is a single camera setup. And now it's become like just a choice. So for myself, for the work that I've created, especially in grad school, I enjoy the single camera setup, and I enjoy doing in-camera editing, which I'll talk a little bit about later. So I consider myself a film artist rather than a video artist. And my works are primarily single camera setups, and I like to use different styles: experimental, collage, and video essay styles. And so we'll discuss what those look like individually towards the end. we'll get into some technicals and then we'll have a little bit of fun. So during school, I interned for both commercial and documentary projects. This involved me being involved in every part of film production. So the front end, which is called pre-production, the back end, which is where the editing happens, as well as the actual shooting of the event. And so I've been on commercial sets. I've been a production assistant. For short is called a PA, and they're essentially the people who do everything, just running around, grabbing stuff. You always have to be able to drive. It's kind of runt work, but some people are really good at it, so they make a career out of it, honestly. So my point is that this experience brought me to my first job after graduation, which was working as a video technician and a video editor assistant for commercial agencies. And it's there that I learned the film and commercial industry standards for film, video, file sizes, and codecs, which we'll get into a little bit later. And so I don't want to bore you with all of those details, but what I'm going to ask for is that if you can go into the Q&A part, I guess Coca, if I'm not sure if you know how people can submit their questions, but if you want to, if you have any specific questions about file sizes or file types and codecs, feel free to put in a question, and we'll get to that when we get to that part of the workshop. So all of these experiences that I've had remain useful, as I will occasionally take on videographer jobs, which essentially means that I'll record, edit, and deliver completed projects for art galleries and artist studios, depending on what the artist is looking for. And so I can appreciate the skills I learned in the commercial industry, but I'm way more excited about how film and video have developed rapidly since the late 19th century, and our relationship with the moving image and how we see and experience the world around us, as well as how we manipulate them. All right, now let's get into the nitty-gritty. Oh, okay, give me 1 second. So, hey, Coca, can you make me a co-host for some reason?
Of course, and I'm sorry, my computer just froze.
No worries.
Things happened,
Okay.
so I wasn't ignoring anyone.
That's quite all right.
Okay, you should be all set.
Yes. That's great. Thank you. All right. So I want to start with what video editing is. So video editing is the process of manipulating and rearranging video shots to create a new work. And in the film industry, editing is considered part of the post-production process. And so that is the process that takes place after production. So after the capture of the video, capturing audio, or gathering your source material, whatever that means for you. So that could be sourcing it online, recording it live, or collecting a series of original films to create a reel of some kind. And so other tasks included in the post-production that I didn't include in this post are color corrections, or adding a mood to the film overall by using color or contrast, etc., and sound mixing. And so this would occur right after we capture the audio. I want to talk a little bit about pre-production. So pre-production ideally happens before you start production, or before you, and definitely before you go into post-production. But depending on your project, you may not need to do, for instance, you may not need to do actual production, because doing the pre-production requires you to research and to get together your source material. So it can kind of become a Venn diagram. You can kind of go in between these two in order to get to this point here. But typically what I've been doing, so some of the projects that I've interned on are documentary films. And so what I'll do is I'll actually be part of the research part of it. And that might require looking up film festivals or looking up background information for people that you're interviewing, right? Looking up whatever equipment that your budget can afford, as well as what your situation setup is. I was talking to a good friend of mine yesterday, and he was asking me for tips on what equipment he would need in order to shoot a video with an iPhone and, you know, in a very inexpensive light and audio equipment. And so you want to consider what your budget is. You want to Google what people are doing. Fortunately, there's a lot of that available already on YouTube. A lot of people on TikTok or on social media, different social media platforms are using a circular, it kind of looks like this here, a circular light. I actually forgot what the actual name is for it, but if you look up just like social media light setup, you can find some really affordable options. Funding, like I just said, but also funding in terms of where you can get support. You can get support in the art world. You can also get support from different film festivals. If you are interested in creating a film, you can also probably just like be creative and look for grants in your local area. I'm in support of looking in your local area and actually not banking on national funding opportunities, because then the ratio for you to get money from those opportunities is very slim, and you'd be surprised how much money is in your local area, your local cities, that if you're not living in New York or if you're not living in LA, that can really be helpful. And then crew, it really depends on what you're able to afford. It also is something to look into and pay attention in terms of what your friends are doing. You'd be surprised how many different hats people have to wear. So yeah, so that pretty much covers the three processes of like filming in general. So next, I want to talk about the goals of editing, or why editing. So one of the reasons that people may want to use editing is to remove unwanted footage. So that could be just like a mess up, or like if people are pausing in an interview, you might want to edit that out. Or if there's just a simple, like, there's I don't know, you just don't find that area of the footage attractive and you want to remove it. Also, choosing the best material. So it's kind of the opposite, or what you get ideally after you've removed unwanted footage, and choose it. And so that allows you to choose the best material. But that also could go back to just sourcing material and finding the best material out of that. You also have, as a part of your goals as editing, could be creating a flow of information. And so that's what we're going to get into in a little bit, just in terms of the styles and just like the different ways that information is delivered. You also might want to add effects or add graphics or add music, etc. And that in turn goes into the next one, which is changing the style, the pace, so the speed, or the mood. The mood can be largely affected because of color or because of graphics and effects and music, especially. And then I think ultimately what ends up happening whenever you get into editing is that your goal is to tell a point of view, whatever that is, how abstract that is, or how information driven that is. In terms of editing, you are creating a linear experience through time. And so ultimately you're showcasing a point of view on either a subject or a topic. So this is sort of my reasons of why I edit also. All right, so let's get into the history of moving pictures. I want to start with the kinetoscope. So the kinetoscope is an early motion picture exhibition device that was designed in the late 19th century. It was meant to view films by looking through a peephole. And so you can see that this person is looking through this object here, and what they're looking at is a string of film, and it is moving across this kind of conveyor belt, and there is light being shined through, and there is actually like a at a high shutter speed, and that simply means that the light that's being shown is closing and opening, closing and opening, closing and opening, so that you're seeing each image, and they're moving rapidly to create the sense of movement. And I think I have a video that I wanted to show y'all. Yes, I think this is pretty neat. So this is what I'm about to play for you, is a recording of a sneeze, which was recorded in 1894, just to give you a sense of what it looked like when you were looking through the kinetoscope. So let me just open this real quick. It's available at the Library of Congress, so that's fun. And it's just very simple, and it's very slow. And that's really it. I just want to play it one more time just so you can kind of see that it was not great, but I think it's kind of cool that this image was captured in 1894. So, okay, we're going to go back to looking at the kinetoscope. Right, so it was invented by Thomas Edison and William Dixon in the US in 1891. And so it said actually that Edison regarded this invention as an insignificant toy. But when it was publicly exhibited in New York City, it immediately took off. So yeah, Thomas Edison didn't know what the hell he was, I mean, I don't know if I can curse, but Thomas Edison didn't know what he was talking about, honestly. But he knew what he was making, and it was really cool. So several kinetoscopes were being sold all over Europe, and that essentially formed the basis for the first film projector, which is called the cinematograph. And that was invented by the Lumiere brothers in France, and it was inspired by Thomas Edison's kinetoscope and Emile Reynaud's optical theater in Paris. And I think this is pretty cool because you can actually see the film here, even though this is just a picture, a drawing. You can see like there's film here that's rolling around. And so what was on that film was actually paint. So it's essentially animation, and it was individual paintings painted on gelatin plates that were then fitted into these kind of small little boxes. And like somehow, I didn't look too much into how it was actually connected, but somehow put together. And so then you had this image here that was being projected. And it's kind of cool to kind of figure out how they did that. But so in the last 200 years, right, because this is actually not a long time ago, video editing has evolved at a rapid pace, becoming a medium to craft films, edit music videos, or, you know, it could also be used for, and it has been used for editing vacation reels. So before there was like digital editing, there was analog editing. And actually at Cooper Union, there is, I want to say there still is one. I haven't been there in a while, so I don't know if they still have it. But when I was there, there was like this monstrosity, and it allowed you to, there's like a blue, it allowed you to view film rolls all together, as well as edit them together and view them back. And the more newer ones have like these nice speakers. And so it became an art, like a physical art, because people were wanting to make films and tell stories. And in the beginning, video editing was only scissors and glue. So one of the things that people would do was actually splice them together using little contraptions like this. So this is 8mm film, and 16mm film would be a little larger. But essentially the idea is that you would slice the film just so you can like edit it down, join it to another piece of film. And so that's essentially how you were able to edit, is just simply cut down the film itself. And so I want to talk about the first use of editing in film. And that's where we're going to Come Along Do, which was by Robert W. Paul. It was made in 1898. Now, this is also not really impressive, except for the fact that it was made a long time ago, just because, and I'll show you, just because essentially what it was a silent film, and the edit is when this man walks into the art section. And so I just kind of want to show y'all my research, because I think it's cool. So here we go. Decided to open up in something else. Here we go, QuickTime. All right. So, okay, so it's not that this file is corrupted, but that the film actually was. So unfortunately, the film was so old and I guess just not well preserved that all they have is this scene playing out and only these still images. But the important part is that this was a big deal for them to transition into another place. And as simple as that is, it works. It establishes that they are inside. And that kind of, technology back then just sort of helped bring the plot along. So I just think that's kind of neat. All right, so back to this. So now I want to go into different editing softwares. That's probably why a lot of you are here. And so I want to go over free editing software because a friend of mine made it evident that, not everybody is able to afford Premiere Pro, and it's kind of like a big ask to have people download and to purchase, this software. And so what are some free options? And so both of these are free to use, but they are very limited. They're limited in terms of being precise about where you edit. So I will not be covering these, but I do encourage you to check them out just so that you can get a bit comfortable with editing, especially if you are kind of hesitant about investing your money into a software like Premiere Pro. And so I encourage you to apply whatever you learned today and check out these free software. So there's Windows Video Maker, which is available on Windows PCs. And then you have iMovie. iMovie is an Apple product. Now, next I want to talk about the editing softwares that cost. So you have an Adobe software, Premiere Pro, which is what I'm going to be discussing with you. I'll be showing you today. And that comes with a 7-day trial. So you can try it for 7 days before you want to commit to purchase. If you do like it, or if you know you're going to be using this for a while for a project coming up, or you just want to like check it out for a month or two, you can go month to month for about $30. And then I think it goes up from there to being about $52.99. And so that's available on Mac and PC. Yeah, and you can get it as part of a creative suite. So you can get this and also Audition, although I'm not sure if they come in the same package, but there's several options that you can look at on Adobe software. Now we have Final Cut Pro X, and I'll try not to be too long-winded because I kind of have a beef with this software only because of what it's replacing. So Final Cut Pro X is the latest of the Final Cut Pro software. So there have been different Final Cut Pros, like Final Cut Pro 8, 9, etc. And it was great until Apple bought it. That's my opinion. You do get a 90-day trial. That's cool. There is no month-to-month with this. It's a flat fee for $300, which that's not my issue. But my issue is that it's not that different from iMovie, and I guess that's good for people who are transitioning out of iMovie. But I think it's a bit of an ask to have you jump from a free software to a software that costs $300, and you're not getting that much a difference in terms of specificity, in terms of just like being able to edit specifically. So I've never really engaged with it. I'm probably just stubborn. I probably should check it out, but you know, go with what your gut is telling you, go with what you're able to afford. So now we're gonna get into actually like the Premiere Pro overview. So let me just get my project out. I'm gonna show you guys a project that I'm currently working on. I'm gonna show you, I'm gonna actually do it. Let me see, how am I gonna do this? I'm gonna bring up the project, so give me 1 second. Okay, so here it is. And let's get these other screens out of the way. All right, so this is not what what Premiere Pro is gonna look like when you first open it. What it's gonna look like is, see if I can just do a new project. So new project, what you're gonna see is this screen here. And the first thing it's gonna do is ask you to name your project. So you wanna name it something that maybe has a date. As you can see here, 2019 Skowhegan. That was something that I titled just my folder. But for this project, I named it Kelowna Wear because that was what I was researching. And so you want to name it something that that's going to be helpful in terms of finding it. And then here you have the location bar. This is important. Don't skip this because this is going to help you be organized. And so what you want to do is hit browse. And for me, let's see, I hope you guys can actually see this and that it's not just, should be able to see it. So you're gonna open it up. I'm going to my, my drive and I'm just gonna talk a little bit about media organization. So file organization. And so you see here, I have my years and I have next to it just something to help me know what it's for. And it usually jogs my memory, but you can be as specific as you want to. You could also just leave it to be the year or something, but just something so that it's helpful. So for, say if I'm, you know, continuing to work on Skowhegan, but I'm making a new project. So I want to just like make sure I see here which folder I'm putting it into. So this is the main folder. And then I have these other folders. And This one, PR, Premiere Pro. So that's where I keep all my projects, my different projects, however many things I want to do. And so I have Colonaware here. So, and this is projects that I did at Skowhegan. So I just keep them in a folder so I remember where they're associated with. Now these other places in this folder are also just like photos, things that I wanted to print, and then also video. So the video are the different cameras that I've used, and I've named them. I think that's really important. You want to name your folders according to the camera that you're using if you're using different cameras, because you're going to forget. You're going to forget until you bring them in and you like preview them, and that's going to take a long time. So it's very helpful just to know that, okay, I shot this on my Canon 60D. Oh, I shot this on a drone. I shot this on a GoPro. It's just very helpful that way. Anyway, so I'm bringing it to this Colonaware. I'm clicking choose, and so you have that set up. The rest of this, you don't really need to bother with, I don't think. There is the scratch disk. The scratch disk is going to basically tell this program where you're going to send all this information. Now, sending all this information as in like the captured video. So if you've captured video within Premiere Pro, not video that you are bringing into it. Also video previews. So video previews are essentially the image that Premiere Pro is generating for you to be able to watch your video back. So this is kind of getting into the minutia of it, but you can see here, it's telling me how much space I have in this area. And so what's helpful about that is like, if you have another, I don't know, if you have another, a separate hard drive, or you've partitioned it or something, then maybe you want to change it. So, okay, getting maybe too heavy into this. So, okay, so you have your project, you have like an ideal title, and then you hit okay. I'm not going to hit okay for this because I already have my project. So let's start with the media browser. So down here, you have essentially your media browser, but you have other tabs too. Stretch this out. So you have your project, and this is where all your files are being brought into after you bring them in through the media browser. So the media browser is right here, and you can see this is where my hard drive shows up. So I can select my hard drive, and I can also choose down here either thumbnail view, which is what you're seeing now, and then I also have a list view. I like the list view because I can see more. So I can go into Skowhegan, and then I can go into video, and then I can go into my Canon, and I can bring in any of these files. I can bring in a bunch of them by hitting shift, pressing shift and clicking whichever other file if I know that I want all of these. And so then you want to right click, or if you're using a laptop, you want to select control click, and then you want to hit import. So what that does, it's going to bring it into your project area, and it's not going to put it in a folder. It's just going to leave it elsewhere, like these two files. So what I have here are my videos, and you can also bring in entire folders. So this is the same folder that I had in my main drive, and I just click the folder and I hit import, and then it brings it all in here. So I don't have to like go through it. And you want to just stay, I recommend being organized because I have anxiety, but do you. If you are a person of chaos, embrace your chaos. That works for you. So all of my, or let's put it this way, let's see. Went over media browser, project panel, which is this one here. And then we want to look at the source monitor. All right, so you're not seeing the source monitor right now, you're seeing just this, but this is where the source monitor typically lives. So if I'm going to select a file, I'm going to go into video, Canon, and I'm just going to choose one of these. So this is the source monitor, where you can choose the portion of your file if you already know what you're looking for. This is kind of like a short way of editing down or getting rid of, selecting your best material. What you can also do if you have a lot of material, so like this is not really complicated for me, so I know like where I want it to be because it's kind of just like one shot and I've taken it like 3 times. So it's not a lot of information. But if you're dealing with a lot of information, you have multiple interviews, for example, then what you might want to do is actually create a select timeline. So I'm going to create a new timeline. Down here, if I just hover over, you can see this kind of showing up. Here you can create new bins. So these are bins, they're basically folders. And that's where you can organize your project in your project panel. And then there's this, and it says new item. So here you can actually create a new item, and you see a list here, has a bunch of stuff. We're just gonna choose sequence. Now this is fun. This gives you a lot of options, and it's going to just automatically go to ARRI, which that's like an editing mode for a ARRI cinema setting. I'm not going to really explain too much about that. But what you can do is like you can go to digital SLR, which is essentially like is essentially a photography camera that can record video. And so what you're looking at here are dimensions. So dimensions of the, of the screen that you want to work with. And you're going to choose the one that is the highest dimension that matches your footage. And what I mean by that is that your video, let's get out of this real quick. So if I go to video and I go to files, let's see. Is it actually, here we go. So, and what I'm doing right now is scrolling to look at the information. So I'll extend this so you can see everything. And so what this is doing is that it's telling me the frame rate. And the frame rate is essentially how many frames you're seeing per second. So for this one, it's 23.976, and that has a lot to do with, generally speaking, that has a lot to do with the Society of Motion Picture and Television Editors that decided that 23.976 is a frame rate that films should be in. It's a slower frame rate than what other people use, which is 29.97 or 30 frames per second. Also 23.976 is essentially 24 frames a second, which is the frame per second that most animations use. 30 frames per second is an earlier standard, and it's just as good as 24 frames per second. Honestly, there's not that much of a difference, but anyway, it's pretty standard, and I just kind of stick to it because of, like I said, working in the commercial industry. Anyway, so it tells me the media start, which all my media starts at 0, and then it tells me how long each media is. So this is 6 minutes, this is seconds, and this is frames. And so this is hours. And then, of course, it'll tell me the media duration. And it will actually show me like the in point and out point that I've chosen for any particular film. So if I double click this clip, It shows up in my source monitor, right? And you can see that I already have an in point and an out point. And so from here, I can actually just grab the video and drag it to my timeline. And so that's what these numbers are. That's all I meant to bring up with that. And so the main reason why I'm showing you this is to show you basically how to check your media. So my media has a dimension of 1920 pixels by 1080 pixels. And so that is the largest, typically the largest. It can go larger, but this is for standard, like the highest, like HD, 1080 HD. And it'll also tell me the audio information, which I won't go into that too much. So there you have it. So this is, all my footage is 1080. And see, you can see here, actually, there's this JPEG, and that just shows you the size of that JPEG, the pixels that make up that. So it's pretty large, but anyway. So, okay. So going back to creating a new sequence, if I hit sequence and I go back to my digital SLR options, I could go to 720p, but I don't need to because I have a lot of information. So the information that I have in my film allows me to choose 1080p 24 because that's the frames that I shot it at. That's also important. You want to pay attention to that as well, because essentially you want your sequence to match your files so that you're not having to render, you're not having a lot of issues come up. So ideally you want to match it. And you want to just go through here and figure out what camera you're using and if it's available. If not, you can go to digital SLR. Most likely you're using that. And yeah, so you would choose this, and it can show you, it shows you here all the information about this setting. You can also create your own setting, but I think if you're just starting out, you just should check out the available presets and not complicate your life. Then you'd hit OK, and you'd have your sequences. Let me go ahead and collapse these. So what I have set up here is kind of a mess, honestly. It makes sense to me. So, you know, and what I mean by a mess is that this file, okay, so each of these are viewing layers. So V1, viewing layer 1, V2, viewing track 2, et cetera, et cetera. So that's essentially what this is telling you. And say if I want to bring in this clip onto my timeline, I'm going to bring it over here, just somewhere over here. So wherever this here is, sorry, this cursor or this line here, you go up to the source monitor, you actually have these options here of how to place your file onto the timeline. So you can overwrite or you can insert. So actually, let me bring this here. So if I wanted to insert it, it basically does what it says it's going to do. It's going to make the space, and that means what happens in the video also happens in the audio. Now, I can also just choose where I want to place it by just dragging the video. If I don't want the audio and I just want the video here, I can just click and drag, and I just have the video here, and you can just kind of line it up. It can sync to one of your other clips. And the reason why I was doing that is because you have like this snap option here. If I were to unclick that, do that again, then I can grab it. Sorry, grab it. And you see it's not locking onto anything, so it's pretty smooth. So anyway, another reason why I say that it's a little messy is because ideally what you want to do is like, it's fine for it to look like this at first, But if I'm really trying to, just have it be this neat thing that I'm not going to revisit again and I'm pretty happy with it, I want to condense it. And so, like, for instance, what's happening here is that you have this file that's on top, and whatever's on the top viewing track, I got the spinning wheel of death. Here we go. Whatever I have on viewing track 6, that's what I'm going to see. So I'm not going to see this track here. Let me actually zoom in so you can actually see what's going on. So you're not going to see this because this is on top. And I hope that makes sense in general. And the reason why this red bar is showing up is because I actually moved this. And if I double click this clip up here, when I go to Effect Controls, that will show you the effects or anything that you have going on with this layer. And so this is only text. And what I have going on here, I actually don't remember what I have going on here, but essentially there are all these effects. So I'm going a little all over the place, so I really apologize. My goal is to just show you, get you familiar with what it looks like and where generally things are. So what I mean by effects is that in your project and media browser area here, this is also where you're going to find effects. So you click this tab and you have all these folders that have different effects. Now you can do audio effects, you can do audio effects here, or you can do audio effects in Audition. I actually might just keep it here to keep it simple. And so what I did was I clicked on filter and EQ, and EQ essentially means equalizer. So and you can see it written out here, graphic equalizer, EQ. And so under here, essentially what you have are different ways of editing your audio. And what you would do is you would drag and drop it onto the file itself. You can just drag it onto it. So for instance, there's this audio bit here. Let me see. No, I'm not going to do that one. Okay, so here's my audio track. And the same thing that goes with the viewing track 1, 2, 3, 4. You have the same thing with audio. Audio 1, 2, 3. And this being selected isn't really anything. The main thing with this is that if you are bringing in a source and you want it to be on a certain track, like if you're clicking insert or you're clicking overwrite, you basically want to have this connected to whichever layer you're trying to bring it onto. So for V1, if I'm going to, let's see. Yeah, so if I'm going to bring this file here, but I don't want it to go on V1, I want it to be on V2. Then I go ahead and get my cursor to where I want it to start at. I'm going to select V2, deselect V1, and click V2 so that V1 on this side lines up. And that way, when I go ahead and hit insert, it will go on V2, like so. All right, so back to the audio. So I'm going to pay attention to this part here, and I'm going to isolate it. And what I mean by that, I'm going to make it a solo track. And that's what this S is. This S simply means to make this one solo so you're not hearing anything else. Swimmers. So if I were to deselect it, then you would hear all the other tracks. Avid swimmers. Okay, and then you can also just mute it so that you only hear all the other tracks and you don't use that one. All right, so for now, we're gonna just go ahead with the solo. And there's nothing really wrong with this audio recording, but I just wanna show you how some of these audio effects work. So I'm gonna click Effect Controls, and it's important to note that in order to see what's going on with this file, I have to have it selected. So if I choose you. You see it kind of changes a little bit, the options here. And when I go back to this one, it changes again because, yeah. So what I'm gonna do is, I'm gonna actually show y'all the simple parametric equalizer. Let's see. No, I'm not gonna show you that one. Let me see. Okay. Right, this is the one. So I'm gonna show you the parametric equalizer. And essentially, that's kind of my go-to in order to edit audio or to fiddle around with it. Some other good ones are bass and treble. Just if you want to make it sound. So bass will basically increase the bass and make it have a deeper sound, and treble will increase essentially the high notes. So if someone has a lot of heavy sounds around them, you can decrease the bass. And I'll just drag it up here to show you what I'm talking about. So the bass here, if I just bring this up to 12. Avid swim. Does it actually? Let me see. Swimmers call my lineage. Excavated. Avid swimmers call my lineage. It's actually not showing you much of a difference, but essentially what it would do is if I had background sounds or something like that, I could fiddle around with it. So what I wanted to show you was the parametric equalizer, because what it allows you to do is kind of play around with these knobs. And so what it's showing you is that this L is essentially the low part of the audio. And this is the high. So make it a bit more shrill. And then the lower you bring it down, the more, essentially more bass that you're taking out of it. So, avid swimmers call my lineage. Excavated from. And so. Avid swimmers call my lineage. I bring this all the way up and I bring this all the way down with that, what happens then? Some funky stuff might happen. Avid swimmers call. This file is super resistant. And so, again, this is just avid swimmers call my lineage. But I would personally just encourage you to Google and look up on YouTube videos about Premiere Pro. And as you're going through your project, you're gonna run into unique problems. Don't be afraid. Somebody has run into those problems as well. Being a video editor, you are basically donning the hat of being a troubleshooter. So don't be afraid if it doesn't work out the first time, just like what's going on with me right now. But to be honest, the audio really doesn't have a lot of things wrong with it. So it's hard to show you how parametric equalizer would work typically, but it's just so that you know everything's there, and just so that you know that you know, things are gonna happen. You're gonna get a little frustrated at first, you know, when you're trying to make things happen, and the key is to have patience and to know and remember that somebody has been down this road, somebody has figured this out. So that's really what the internet is for, in my mind, is that it allows you to get through a lot of these hurdles, a lot of these questions, a lot of these concerns about using Premiere Pro and any software for that matter, whether it's this one or iMovie. What you want to do is have your project, and your project will help you learn how to how to understand these softwares. Another thing that's really important, because editing, is this tool, this razor tool. So this whole row here are several different tools and things that you can use. I'll use maybe this one here to select. And so what'll happen is you can see here, there's two lines. And so basically wherever it's pointing, that's where it's gonna select. So you see here, it's selecting everything that's to the right of the arrow. Another one is, I'll just go over the razor tool here. Actually, let me go back to my select tool so that I can deselect everything. Now my razor tool, and you see there's a little B next to razor tool. That means that's your setting, your shortcut key for that. And this one is A. So if I go between it, B will just go ahead and switch me to razor without having to click it. A will bring me back to the arrow tool. So B here, I'm gonna go ahead and zoom in. And so what you can do is basically edit. And ideally, you will have set up your keys so that you can fast forward and rewind pretty easily, but I won't get into that. That might be too confusing. So anyway, so you see here, you have a lot of leeway in terms of choosing where you want to edit simply by choosing, like toggling this around. And this is something I don't think you're going to find in iMovie or Windows Media Maker. But see, I can almost like edit on this sound here if I want it to be really precise. And then select on the line here and here. And see that red line showed up again because technically I'm creating a change on this file here. And so that's going to prompt me to render it again. And so if I go back to my select, then I'm back here. Another one is, and this is pretty just automatic, is that you can shorten and extend. And you see this little red line here, that's essentially what that is. And what's really cool is that you can actually just like time it to where you need it to be if there's a certain point. So here it's pretty monotonous, but say, okay, if the hand is coming in and I really want to just like begin my scene on the hand coming in. So it would be kind of like right here. And there you have it. So that's pretty simple editing. Next thing I want to show you are the different workspaces. So right now we've been just looking at the editing workspace. There are other workspaces on here, and essentially what it means is that it will bring up different windows according to your need. For editing, all we need to do is see the footage, bring it in to the timeline, and go ahead and play it back and play around with it. There's this bar here to zoom in and zoom out. And we need to be able to see it play back. And we need to be able to have access to our files and bring them in. That's your editing workspace. Now with color, if I select color, what ends up happening is, I have this kind of squished here, but you have a whole part here where you can do color correction. And this is basically Lumetri color. And right now it's not showing up, and that's because I don't have a file selected. So if I click this file here, it shows up. And so while I'm playing around with this, I'm changing it, making it look more faded. You can see it here. You know, I can change the look. There are all these presets. If I wanted to play around with those, I have at it. If I wanted to tint it, if I wanted to add a vignette, saturation, you have it. You can really play around with this and have some fun and figure out what looks good for you. But what's important to note is that it's only going to affect the clip that I have selected. So if I'm like, you know, okay, I'm done with this one, I'm gonna scroll over here, I'm gonna work on this one now. If I'm going to be changing it around on this panel, it's gonna keep affecting this one. And so what I like to do in order to, like, say if I want the same color correction that I have on this clip, if I want to have the same color correction on this clip and this one, what I would do is have this selected and go up to my effects control, and you see it's here, lumetri color, and you hit Command C. You copy that, and then you can go ahead here and hit Command V to paste. And so it's right here, and it's going to basically treat this clip the same way. You also have effects. I mean, effects essentially, it's useful in the sense that, you know, it makes the effects pretty front and center. So it's not, instead of being down here next to, you know, your media browser, it's going to be over here on a panel of its own. So you can extend this down, and you can kind of check all this stuff out. You can also look for them. So we only went over the audio effects, but there's also video effects. You can do distortion. You can also do color correction from here. You have lumetri color. It's essentially the same thing. So that's another cool thing about Premiere Pro. There's many things, there's many ways to do the same thing. And essentially you just want to figure out what works best for you. And let's see, you can also do transitions here. You have your transitions down here. A lot of these are kind of corny, but you can use them very creatively. You can embrace the corn. And yeah, you can check that out as well. You also have, you have time. And so at this moment, I would just encourage everyone, if you have any particular questions, to put them towards the Q&A. Let me actually see if there's, okay, so we do have some questions. Someone's asking, right, it will, this is being recorded just for those who have to leave. So yeah, so there's that. So a lot of these, right, okay, so someone asked, would you grab the icon to the right of drag video only to drag the accompanying audio? Right, so okay, so I'll answer that one since it's relative to what we're doing right now. I do see some other questions that hopefully I'll be able to get to. So let's go back to the source here. So the question is essentially, oh, look at this. It looks like a little, here we go. So the question is, if I grab the icon to the right of the drag video only, will it drag the accompanying audio for the source? So that's a good question. So this will drag the audio only, and this will drag the video only. Now, I can just grab from here the general picture in order to make sure that I get both video and audio. So let me go ahead and just show you how I do that. So you see here, I'm grabbing both video and audio here. And so I can just kind of like move that around, and that's another option instead of just like placing your selector tool to the beginning of whichever clip and placing it. For this one, I can kind of just like place it however I want to. If you want to just like lock it, no, that's not going to work. That's going to bring it all the way to the beginning. So anyway, so there's this. So if I wanted to go back and I wanted it to lock, remember I would click the snap in timeline and I would grab from the picture itself. And then there we go. I can like snap it and arrange it to wherever I want it to be. So if I want it to be lined up with this one here, I can just drag and drop. So someone else. Right, so doing slow motion. Now doing a time lapse, that, I mean, they're basically the same thing. not the same thing, but slow motion and time lapse. Okay, so let's do 2 and 1, 2. Okay, let's try with this one. So I'm gonna go ahead and zoom in. I'm gonna condense this so we can focus. Woo. See what I did there? I actually just rearranged it. So if I play this back, you can see this is where the audio is. So another thing to mention is that you can make a workspace however you want it to be. I'm not able to show it up here, but there is actually if you're in your Premiere Pro software, you can go up to Window and Workspaces, and you can actually save however you have your workspace set up as a new workspace. All right, so just gonna squeeze that down here so I don't have to worry about it. And I'm gonna go in here. So you can actually see that I've already, so if you look at the clip here, it has a bracket and it says negative 250%. That's the speed that I already have it set to. And basically what that means is that it is going in reverse. So negative means it's going in reverse. 250, that is, let's see. What you want to do is you want to right click or control click your file and you want to go to speed duration. Now I have it at 250% speed. And let me see, I always get this wrong, honestly. But you see here, I have it as reverse speed. But so 250 would make it, I think it would make it faster. Let me do 50% and let's see what that does. I'm gonna keep it at negative 50 50. So the reverse speed basically makes it negative, so I don't have to worry about that. So if I hit 50, right, it makes it longer. So 250 actually makes it faster and makes the clip shorter. So if I go backwards and I hit control click and then I go to speed duration, and then I choose to make it very like even faster. Maybe I want to do 500 because I'm crazy. All right, so it made it shorter. It also brought up the red bar. So in order to, let's see, it might actually play fine for me, but sometimes if you have too many effects going on, you're gonna have to render it. Sometimes it'll be nice to you if you don't have a lot else going on in your program. So this is maybe a little bit faster, right? And so what you're basically doing is like the higher the number is, the faster it is. And the lower the number is, the slower it's going to be. But ideally when you're doing slow motion, you want to make it slow motion from inside the camera. You can do it in post. You can do a lot of things in post, but honestly, what makes a good quality film is going to be doing it all, as much of it in camera, in my opinion. But also in terms of slow motion, one of the cameras that I have my eye on is the Sony 7A 3. Just remembering off the top of my head, but essentially what it is that it has as much information available as a actual film camera. So Sony 7A 3, and it's pretty pricey. Also, just real quick, somebody's asking, is there a student price? There is a student price for Premiere Pro. That's another reason why I would advocate for that one. I don't know about Final Cut X, but I would think they would have the same thing. And then I wasn't really going to get into color correction, but I can a little bit. It seems like there's a lot of, let's see, how many viewing have effects to make a video look older, like one of the first videos we showed. Right, so making video look older. All right. There's a demand for color correction here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep this selected. We'll keep it as it is. And then we'll go over to the color workspace. So here we have the Lumetri. This one doesn't have Lumetri, but it will as soon as we start working on it. I'll show you in a second. And so in terms of making it look old, sorry, I just don't like that filter. So you see here, it says faded film. I mean, I would say you can probably just like use a faded film, and then in terms of getting it to look old, I think that's going to require you to bring in some kind of image online of like an old footage and actually place it on top of the file itself. So what I'll do is bring this down to project, and I mean, I'm not going to do the old film thing, but what is this image? All right, I'll bring this image in. I don't need, yeah. So with images, it comes in pretty standard. So I'm just dragging it straight from the project window instead of the source panel. So I'm going to lay it over, and what I'm going to do is, let's see, I'm on this layer. So this is the layer that we're looking at. And so I'm going to go over to effects control, and then I'm going to, I'm going to actually go into effects. So we're going to go into effects workspace just so that you can kind of get used to what these look like. And so here you have the color correction, but what I'm going to do is, oh, no, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go to effects here. And you see what I just did here? I just toggled the opacity layer, which comes with each layer. It's already there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to blend mode. And for people who are used to Photoshop, it's essentially, it's a very similar thing. You have all the same options in terms of layering things and making them look different or whatever. So I don't know, I can use overlay. You can have this kind of effect. And so you can get really clever with this, and you can change the opacity here. So if I wanted to have it at 50 or whatever, and I could actually go ahead and add a Lumetri layer on this one. If I go back to color, and so now it's showing me that I'm working on this image file. And so I can actually go to these presets and kind of play around with it if I wanted to. And some of them may not change it too much, but you can actually see here what this SL blue code does to the actual image. But because I have a blend mode on it, the overlay is working in tandem with that. So you can really get kind of creative with that. All right, so it's 7:45. I want to get into some fun things, just talking about styles and techniques. I hope this has been helpful, this portion of it. If you want to stick around, then we will get into what I think is going to be pretty fun stuff. It's a lot of video watching and talking about like what other people have done, specifically both within the art world as well as in film and Hollywood and all that stuff. All right, so we're going to switch gears. All right, so I want to talk to you about editing techniques. We have two that we're going to talk about today. I actually don't know if there's other ones. There probably are. So the first one is continuity editing. And it's a classical form of editing where an edit can create a seamless action of events taking place, where the edit, the cut in the video brings you into it. What is it? It advances the plot. So it brings you further. It's kind of like if you're a really good editor and you're doing continuity editing and you're working on a film, you will not even notice or really pay attention to what the editor is doing. That means the editor is doing a really good job. And then you have montage editing. And montage editing is a technique of sequencing series of images So you're condensing space, like what we were doing with and condensing time. So what we're doing with speeding up files and doing all these other things and condensing information. And so I put this note here saying that TikTok montages can be like a kind of example of it. It's kind of a crude example, but nuts and bolts, it basically is that you're condensing the amount of time, and it's used for humor, mostly, but also for like a lot of information. So people are like already editing within social media all the time, especially on TikTok. So what I want to show you guys is, is a video made by David Bittencourt, and it is available on YouTube. And so he's just going to discuss for about 4 minutes what continuity editing looks like and in terms of its examples. So.
The history of cinematic innovation is all about successive filmmakers building upon the accomplishments of their earlier influences. In the beginning, there was no editing, unless you count beginning and ending the film as edits. The Lumiere brothers, who perfected methods to both shoot and project moving images, made a whole series of actualities, basically very short documentaries capturing scenes they thought their audiences would find entertaining or interesting. And back then, all any film had to do was move to entertain and astound its audience. And the movies also employed artful composition and effective use of the frame and off-screen space. So who needed stories, multiple angles, and editing? A stage magician named Georges Méliès was so impressed with the work that he ran out and bought one of their cameras, which he used to make a series of movies that moved the art of editing, and filmmaking in general, forward. Let's look at some scenes from Méliès's 1902 film, A Trip to the Moon, and I'll show you what I mean. First of all, George was all about mise en scène. Check out the elaborate detail, costumes, and forced perspective of this set. Still, you might say, where's the editing? This scene is captured in a single extended wide-angle shot, as if it were a play and not a movie. Well, why not? That's what Méliès knew. Remember, movies were brand new. These guys hadn't been absorbing cinematic language since infancy like you and I. They had to figure it out all by themselves. Watching this scene, modern audiences can't help but yearn for the camera to isolate details into a more meaningful narrative sequence. Without editing, we can't differentiate any one wizard scientist from any other wizard scientist, or equate any specific reactions to any particular detail of the plan. It's all just up there and up to us to decide what to look at when. But while Méliès presented every event in essentially the same wide-angle continuous shot, he at least edited together a series of events, which allowed him to tell a much more complex story than anything the Lumiere brothers could manage with their 45-second actualities. But Méliès didn't trust the straight cut. You'll notice that he moves to the next shot with a dissolve. Like most of his contemporaries, he didn't trust his audience to be able to follow an instantaneous jump to a new view of a new scenario taking place at a different time. So he did his best to ease his audience into the next shot, and by doing so demonstrated a key editing concern, continuity. That is, the desire to continuously orient the viewer in time and space, and to ensure a smooth, logical flow from shot to shot, sequence to sequence, scene to scene. So let's skip ahead. The scientists land on the moon, sleep for a while, get woken up by a lunar snowstorm, and are confronted and chased by moon people. Again, the only real editing happens between these long, one-shot scenes, except for some trick photography. Remember, Méliès was a magician. He discovered that if he stopped his camera, moved a subject out of frame, then restarted his camera, a character or object could appear to evaporate or transform.
So I just want to mention here, so this is kind of what I was talking about earlier, of just like in-camera editing. So like you can edit in Premiere Pro, but you can also edit in camera in terms of just like stopping the camera and playing it again and lining up those clips so that there is actually an edit going on.
inventing the old disappearing subject trick familiar to anyone who has ever watched Sabrina the Teenage Witch. Anyway, that's not all Méliès had to offer. When connecting consecutive scenes, he managed to pioneer a very useful function of continuity editing, the ability to keep the viewer oriented in time and space and still compress narrative time and action. For example, the Earthmen are chased by the Moonmen, then a cut, or dissolve, and wham, bam, they're tied up and in a lunar throne room. We don't see them captured, bound, and transported, yet we understand that it happened. By seeing the beginning of the action in one cut and the end or result of the action in a consecutive cut, we intuitively comprehend the action and time that happened off screen without having to see it. In fact, it is often more satisfying to have a cut suggest something than it is to actually
So I'm just gonna stop it here because we're kind of running low on time, unfortunately, in my opinion. I was really looking forward to showing you guys these films. Let me just kind of go through the rest of these fairly quickly. Someone had asked if I would make these slides available. I can definitely do that. This is Trip to the Moon by George Méliès. If you want to write that down and check it out later, feel free to write it down. I would like to make this available along with the videos and everything. Maybe the videos particularly. I'll have a talk with Coca to maybe make that happen. All right. So
yeah, definitely. We can just send it to all the attendees.
Okay, great, perfect. So I'll make a list of links to these different videos and stuff in case we run out of time. So montage editing is a technique, right? Like I said, sequencing series of images. So the image here is Sergei Mikhailovich Eisenstein, and he was a Soviet film director and film theorist, a pioneer in the theory and practice of montage. He made he basically made montaging a science. And one of the things I want to mention is that montage is different from what I'm going to be briefly talking about as collage and experimental film. I'm actually not going to show you Sergei's, but it will be included in the syllabus. But Sergei basically like had a series of edits that you will recognize in different films once you see this clip. It's like 3 minutes that goes over his different techniques and what he contributed to film. And film and editing is really like looking at what other people are doing and making use of it. So watching films and just figuring out, making a game out of it of like, how did this person do this? How did they make that effect? Did they do an in-camera edit? Blah, blah, blah. So, okay, so editing styles. You have experimental, which aims to reevaluate cinematic conventions and explore non-narrative forms and alternative methods of narrative making. And so I wanted to show you guys a contemporary work. It's by Jatavia Gary, and it's just a short clip, and it's essentially film that is that has been collaged. And what's really nice about it is that you have the painting on the film, as well as a cutting up of the image, as well as a zooming in of the scene. Let me see if I can just really quickly show you guys. Boy, I didn't realize time would just slip away like that. But that's what happens, you know? Happens when you're having fun. All right. Okay.
How can I lose? How can I lose? How can I lose with the help I got? How can I lose? How can I lose? How can I lose with the help I got?
So you see what she did there? She used the opportunity of that shift between this scene of the waterfall, there being this kind of zoom in, and using the opportunity to focus on this star. So there's all these like opportunities to like work in between the edit, to really like use different processes together. And so, right. So that was my example for experimental film. So I'll just leave that on here if you want to go check it out. Actually, Jatavia made available one of her films, but you can go on Vimeo and see a couple of these clips yourself and check them out. She's very talented filmmaker, and her crossover between the art world and the film world is definitely one to look at as a reference. Running out of time. Okay, so for a collage film, I'm not going to show you this one, but it's called Rose Hobart, and it's by this artist named Joseph Cornell, and he made it in 1936. And essentially, it is a re-edit and collage. It's an example of collage film. It's a collage in a sense that he got the original film, East of Borneo, made in 1931, and he cut some parts out, he rearranged others, and he added some nature film excerpts. And then he screened the film in an art gallery in New York City, projecting the film through a piece of blue glass and slowed the speed to a silent film. So that's a collage film, because what it's doing is it's manipulating the original video, and it's basically juxtaposing found footage with different sources, from different sources. And so a funny story that I wanted to say is that if you're familiar with Dali, I think Dali is a ridiculous man, but also like just a great influence has always been a great influence for me. So Salvador Dali, for those of you who don't know, he was a prolific artist from Spain, and he worked in various mediums, including set design and film. And so when he came across Cornell's piece, Rose Hobart, it said that he knocked over the projector, claiming that Cornell had stolen the idea of collage and experimental film from his subconscious. And what's funny about that is because Dali was well known for the paintings that he created, that in terms of like, his paintings were examining human psychology. He was very invested in this idea of like creating work and painting through your subconscious. And so for him, I mean, look at the guy. For him, somebody coming in and stealing stuff from his subconscious was a very real threat. So I kind of think it's funny to think about Salvador Dali doing that. And so last but not least is a video essay. And the video essay is a great source for anybody who wants to keep digging into the rabbit hole of video editing. I guess what I'm saying is, like, anybody who's interested in looking further into video editing, I would strongly recommend Tony Zhao and Taylor Ramos's body of work, Every Frame a Painting. It's a series of video essays, 28 of them, and they're all about film form, film editing, and cinematography. And I wanted to end on that, but we don't really have a lot of time. But I just wanted to end with the fact that each of these forms, including surrealism, because I think surrealism had a lot to do with how collage film and experimental film kind of manifest in today's world. But all three of these can and are used simultaneously as part of like video editing. Video essays are essentially like a written essay where it advances an argument. In the case of Tony Zhao and Taylor Ramos, they are essentially advancing not an argument, but basically a description or a series on the grammar of film editing. Oh, and I think that's it. Coca, are we good?
Thank you so much for doing this. This was so fun and interesting, and yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing those videos in our own time. Thank you everyone for joining us and for getting this right. As I told you on the chat, we're gonna make this available on YouTube, our website, and our social media. So feel free to check that, because yeah, I get that maybe you need to play and pause a few times to like kind of train by your side. So yeah, you also have seen some of Ariel's like process. Make sure you go to her website, arielrenejackson.com, and that way you can see what she does and how she does it, and reach out if you want to. Yeah, thank you everyone. This was, I did not expect seeing examples, and this is so helpful for me to wrap my head around all that editing does. So thank you for
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, and I just want to say, like, I know it was a lot of information running through it. The goal of this was not to do a like sort of one-by-one teaching process. I think that requires a very one-on-one situation, and so I encourage you to not feel to feel frustrated if you felt like you couldn't follow along. It was not meant for that. It was essentially meant for you to become familiar with the program. If you want to take your time and actually go step by step, I strongly encourage you to go on YouTube, to Google, to look up Premiere Pro editing, and to, like Coca said, stop, pause, take your time, and follow it by that way. So yeah, so I hope it was helpful.
Thank you so much. And yeah, we'll send you those materials probably tomorrow. But yeah, thank you guys, and see you. Tomorrow we have a coffee chat at 9 a.m. with Donna Coro. So yeah, join us for that one too.
Thank you.
Good evening. Thanks, y'all.